What's up? Sunday, another live. My family and I went to the Madison Square Garden last night for WWE's main event, and I'd never been to a wrestling event before. And it was pretty cool. My son's going to be 9. He's at a great age, and he just loved it. He was really into it, and it was pretty cool to see. But leaving, it was like, we left with all of the garden, and half of the garden was in the parking garage we were in, and it was about 100 degrees in this parking garage, and we were down there for about an hour just waiting with everybody, just a sea of people waiting for their car, praying, hoping that the car that was getting pulled around was going to be theirs. So that was a tough part of the night because I still had an hour and a half drive home. But all good, right? Did it for him. And we had a pretty good time too, so that's not too bad. And it was cool. They brought out Call Towns, made a guest appearance, and then we knew Brunson was going to be there, but when Brunson came out, the place just was going crazy. So that was awesome. So pretty cool experience. So anyway, I am on my live number 4 out of my 7 lives that I'm doing. It's going to be about healing. I still touch on the core wounds and like protector parts, manager parts, firefighter parts that try to help out our system. I talk about a lot about survival patterns. I believe in all of this. Otherwise, I wouldn't keep talking about it. But I also understand, that this is not easy for people to wrap their head around. I am trying to teach and coach people and help them heal, and it's just they can't see it. It's not in front of them. So I learned years ago that pain can be a great motivator, and for some of us, maybe we are in pain, maybe we are struggling. And so maybe that could push us to wanting to change, which is great. But, if we aren't in a lot of pain, right, and we aren't struggling all the time, then it's quite easy to just think that we're all right. Everything is fine. And it's possible that it is. I'm not saying it's not. I just know that the work that I do and what I talk about is really hard to accept. Because, when people talk about physical abuse or sexual abuse, people will listen. It's almost, for a lot of people, it's more, okay, I understand that. I understand that a child that grew up with physical abuse or sexual abuse needs help, could run into some developmental issues as they get older. But I guess why my message is hard to take in is because I don't talk all about that stuff. I talk about emotional neglect, and that's where I know I lose people. I talk about an emotional abandonment wound, not just a parent physically leaving and growing up without a parent. There's verbal abuse. That is also abusive. It doesn't leave black eyes. It doesn't leave a broken arm like physical abuse might. But verbal abuse is very scarring. And in terms of the research, and a lot of experts out there. I mean, I could just go on with all the books out there that are very familiar now with complex trauma and how family dysfunction really is the main driver in a lot of people's struggles in their adult life, even in their behaviors. IFS therapy, which is what I use, parts work, as well as a lot of this inner child work and all the literature that I've come across, they view a lot as symptoms. So anxiety is a symptom. Depression is a symptom. ADHD is a symptom. Or there are symptoms. And, that's tough. Alcoholism, drug addiction, other addictions. There are symptoms there. And what we're realizing with the medical model right now is that we are constantly addressing the symptoms, especially when it comes to medicating the symptoms. But there is no healing taking place. And it's unfortunate how many people out there that are struggling, that want help, right? They want to change, and they trust the doctors in their life, and they get labeled, right? They get the diagnosis, and they get put on medication. And so I am not a doctor, so I don't tell people to or not to take medication. That's not what I'm saying here. I'm speaking from my own education and my experience, is that I also work with a lot of people. Like, I was talking to a man yesterday who's on antidepressants. Now, I don't tell him, don't be on antidepressants. Our conversation was more about how he has a hard time feeling his feelings and how that bothers him sometimes. How he knows that there is still a lot of grief in his system that he knows could be very healing if he worked through it. But that's that antidepressant is blocking him off from feeling those feelings. And I know other medications are doing that as well. And so when I talk with people, I'm very mindful about where I'm at in my own personal understanding of things. My opinion is that I used to think everything was genetic. I do not believe that anymore. I think genetics get tied into way too many of people's ailments and leave us feeling powerless and helpless. Almost like, well, it is what it is, almost like, what can I do about it type of thing. Or even, you just get the diagnosis and you just chalk it off as like, well, that's it. I don't have to learn anything new about myself. I have the diagnosis. It's from the doctor. And, now I take a medication for it. Like, it sounds like the right way to go. And that is not where I am at. I think if people really want to change and turn things around, they're going to have to do what I have been talking about here, and I'm going to talk about in this live today as well. Otherwise, it's masking symptoms. I mean, years ago, I came across people in Alcoholics Anonymous, and they were saying that alcohol is a symptom of alcoholism. Now, I use the old school alcoholism, alcohol use disorder, whatever makes you feel more comfortable. And some of the writings in AA are geared to telling the people going into AA for help with their drinking is that there's a lot more work going on that you have to do to really overcome a fatal disease such as alcoholism. And I guess it shocks many people to learn that alcohol is only a symptom, right? Because if you have somebody who's an alcoholic in your family, you're not looking at the alcohol as just a symptom, right? You probably have a lot of hurt and anger and pain and sadness attached to the person and how they are living, because, we are wrapped up in behaviors. That's what we get stuck on. And again, I'm going to expand on that a little bit more here, but I always talk about behaviors. That's where we get stuck on, is behaviors. I mean, imagine viewing someone you love as them suffering from something that's, tormenting their life. And I get it, they're tormenting other lives as well, there's no doubt. But it's tormenting their life, and it's only a symptom. Meaning, even if the person just stops drinking, they're still going to act out in different ways. A lot of times they pick up a new or different addiction. They turn to other unhealthy coping behaviors or other survival patterns, still creating a disconnection with their loved ones. So I view the work that I do similarly, that we just have a lot of symptoms, and anxiety is one of them, right? Think about in internal family systems therapy. They don't try to take somebody out of their anxiety. That's amazing to me, right? Somebody's like, I'm having an attack. They don't. Now, in IFS, we'll try to ground the person so that they're as regulated as they can be, right? We'll try to get them regulated enough so that we can then explore the parts that are there. So instead of somebody saying, I have anxiety, we say, a part of me feel anxious. A lot is happening when we can change our mindset. I have ADHD. A part of me is impulsive. So there's a lot that goes on there with that stuff. That's not fully the live for today, so I don't want to get too into it, but I do love sharing for the first 5-10 minutes or so of the live, just to get some information out there, help people feel hopefully a little bit more comfortable. And again, I know how hard this stuff is to accept. I work with people all the time, and it's just what I talk about. It's almost like a foreign language. Like, what do you mean it's attached to a core wound of mine? Like, we don't know we have these core wounds. We don't even know how our adult life, marriage and parenting, I always hit on those two specifically, how that's rearing its ugly head, as they say, in our marriage. So anyway, most of us spend years trying to, stop the behaviors. This is the biggest thing most of us are stuck on, right? We're only able to comprehend what's right in front of us, what we can see, but that's not the work that I do. And so many of us stop at the behavior, but healing is, it goes just so much deeper than a behavior, right? And I've talked about the 7 core wounds, and I'm going to break them down even more today, and how they show up in your adult life, so that you can see, like, oh, maybe this is me. Because if I just go around asking you, hey, do you have the 7 core wounds, right? That's not going to go over so well. Hey, do you have the core wound of powerlessness, right? So that's not people are going to be like, what are you talking about? Anyway, because of these wounds, though, and why I talk about them and why they're so important is because so much stems from these deep core wounds that still live within inside of us. And we form beliefs out of these wounds. And then we have thoughts and feelings that are tied closely to these wounds. And that all produces our behavior. So we have a core wound. We develop a belief out of that core wound. We have thoughts and feelings that go along with the belief that we have about ourselves because of this core wound. And that produces our behavior. So most of us think that, we just have, it's just our personality. I don't believe that anymore. I believe that there are many parts of me. I believe there are many parts of everybody else. Inner parts. And that's foreign language too, right? That's hard to wrap our head around. Like, no, I'm just funny. I'm just angry. I'm just sensitive. I'm just prideful, where I help people break those down into just parts of ourselves. They're not all of who we are. So, why do we have certain behaviors? Why do we act a certain way? And that's a good question to keep in mind, right? I do trace a lot of our wounds back to childhood. I do trace a lot of what we've been through back to how we were raised through parenting. And there's no, you're not going to knock me off that. I have learned just way too much now about how much influence parents have over a child's life, especially going through all those developmental stages. And I get my developmental stages from Erik Erikson. So how do parents show up when the child is an infant, when they're a toddler? Because kids have all these developmental needs that need to be met. And as parents, it's up to us to meet those needs. Now, what I've come across is many times parents try to meet the physical needs of their children. So, clothes, a roof over their head, food, things like that, school supplies, right? Whatever. But that's not a job. The parent's job is not done. Now, I've talked in previous lives where I used the PEERS, PIERS. So there are physical needs, intellectual, emotional, relational, and spiritual needs. And a parent is responsible for covering all of those needs. So that's why I say there is a lot for a parent to do with their children. It's not just having kids and just being like, all right. It's way deeper than that. And it's also accepting that because of there's so much going on, we're not going to show up 100% of the time the way we want. We're not perfect. So that's another one. Is that, we're going to try our best. We're going to do this inner work for our kids. Hopefully we do it for ourselves, right? But it's going to change our relationship with our spouse and with our children. So I also want to, I help people where these behaviors coming from. That's a big one. So wound number one, let's start there. Shame. So I believe that shame is one of the, deepest wounds a person can carry. So how come you don't know that you're walking around with shame? Because you're probably doing a lot of things to not see it. Right? So if I ask somebody, hey, do you have a lot of shame in your system? Right? They're going to be like, what are you talking about? I have no idea what you mean. Like, no, that's ridiculous. Right? So what I do is I look at how an adult is living their life. right? And that shows me how much shame, or if they have shame in their system. So shame is not the fact that you were young and you made a mistake and then you were nurtured and cared for after that. Shame is the fact that you have a belief, again, because of that core wound, that I am a mistake. Right? And there's a big difference in that. So how does this happen? How does somebody develop shame in their childhood throughout their years? Usually it's from parents that were overly critical. So these are parents that just criticized all the time. They rarely praised. Their go-to style of parenting is to, criticize you to try to get you to do better. They just criticize you all the time because they think that somehow, some way, it's going to motivate you. But unfortunately, that backfires. Also, parents can compare their child to other siblings, to other kids in their grade, to other kids on the ball field, right, in the sports. And that also produces a lot of shame. When a kid is made fun of, that also produces a lot of shame. And I've talked about some kids are, or even some adults are more sensitive, right? More deeply feeling than others, but it's there. Sarcasm with parents can be hurtful, right? To a child that feels like they get made fun of, because it's a double whammy. Number one, they feel like they get made fun of, right? Which is sometimes not what you want. And then the other part is that it's coming from somebody that you wholeheartedly trust with your whole life, because your life depends on this person, right? You look at this person, at this parent, with the utmost respect. So shame comes out of that. Being humiliated, being ignored, unless you did something, incredible, some kind of achievement, and then you felt like people then noticed you in the family. Maybe love felt conditional. Maybe mistakes were not safe to make. So you made a mistake as a kid and you got yelled at. You made a mistake as a kid and you got made fun of. You made a mistake as a kid and they judged you. That is going to produce shame in your system. So remember, a child never walks around thinking, my parents struggle expressing unconditional love. Like that's the only reason. Now that's it. A child is, something must be wrong with me. So the child may begin believing again. So now we have this core wound of shame. So what's the belief tied to shame? I'm not enough, right? Something's wrong with me. Right? I'm defective. I'm different than everybody else. I have to earn love. Right? I have to prove myself. Some things I've heard from people in my field that are influential to me anyway, say that the most successful people are driven by shame, because they have that I have to prove myself to everybody else, to the world. And that's why the person can become somebody famous, or they can make a ton of money and become make millions. They can't stop. They can't just say, all right, what a great run. I'm good now. No, everything they're doing is driven by this core wound of shame. So it's never going to be enough. Shame also says, the belief is, if people knew the real me, right, they wouldn't accept me. So if this core wound of shame is still showing up in your life, like how do I know when I come across people? How would you know? Well, perfectionism is one, right? If you are somebody that's a perfectionist, I'm almost certain that you have shame in your system. Mistakes to you feel dangerous. So your job in life is to not make mistakes, right? The problem with that is that it leads to other issues when you're a perfectionist. If I get everything right, then I'm not going to get criticized as much as I did. Or maybe I'll finally feel good enough. So, how does this tie into how you are as an adult? Maybe you are a workaholic. Right? When somebody's a workaholic, that speaks volumes to me. Achievement becomes how you measure your worth, right? So when people talk about their achievements in this way of, it's almost like I sense that they're doing it so that people are like, oh, wow, okay. Wow, that's a great job. And when we get that feedback from others, that feeds our low self-worth, right? That's where we get our self-worth from. They call it outsourcing. I shouldn't have to outsource my worth. It should already be internal. But when you have a core wound of shame, you don't have high self-worth. You don't know how to rest, right? You can't slow down. You can't rest because, again, that's just going to trigger shame. Who rests? You're so lazy. Look at all the other people doing X, Y, and Z. And here you are just not doing anything. So that's touching on our shame, right? If you're not producing, if you're not out there doing something, right, you can begin questioning your value. Because, again, your value comes from, it's not intrinsically. It comes from how people see you, what you accomplish. Maybe you struggle receiving compliments. That's a good one. Right? So somebody compliments you and you put your head down, right? You put your eyes down. Or somebody compliments you and you just kind of throw a little sarcastic joke out there. Where somebody compliments you and you kind of knock yourself. Now, I've done this in the past. I'll give you an example of what I've done. Is when I started getting sober, I started to run a lot again. And run a lot for me because I had gained a lot of weight and I was losing weight. So I was running like 3 miles a day and about 4 days a week. So I'm not a marathoner by any means. But for me, that was a lot from having not run or did any cardio for many years. And I came across a guy I know. I had just finished my run. And he was like, oh, wow. He's like, what were you doing? Were you out there running? And I said, yeah, I just finished the run. He was like, oh, how long? I said, oh, it was a 3-mile run. He's like, oh, man. He's like, that's incredible. He's like, I wish I got off the couch and went out there and got a run in. And I just couldn't allow the compliment and him saying that just to sit where it was. So I go, I sit on the couch mostly too. I'm like, I only do this once in a while. I'm like, you just caught me on a good day. Why is that? Why did I have to downplay an accomplishment of mine? Why did I have to downplay something I should be just so proud of? Not in an arrogant way, but in like an owning it kind of way. Like, yeah, I could have sat on the couch and you know what? I didn't. And I haven't done that. 4 days a week, I'm out there running these 3 miles. Hey, man, thank you for noticing that. I appreciate that and letting that just sink in. But again, core wound of shame, it's not going to let that sink in. Right? Or someone tells you, hey, you did a great job. Instead of just receiving that, you immediately think, oh, they're just being nice. What are they going to be mean to me? They don't even really know what they're being nice about, or they don't even really know me. Because compliments don't match the story that we believe about ourselves. So maybe you constantly compare yourself to other people, right? Someone else that's successful. And instead of like celebrating them, instead of trying to learn from them, our mind immediately goes to, hey, how come I'm not that successful? How come I'm not there? Like, what's wrong with me then? There's shame. So anytime we're comparing, there is shame involved. So maybe you just never feel satisfied. You accomplish something, you feel really proud of it, and then 5 minutes later, a day later, your mind moves right back to being like, got to accomplish something else now. With shame, it's never enough. So what happens is when people come into me, they aren't sitting down and saying, hey, Jared, can you help me with my shame? No. And they may or may not even notice that they have perfectionism going on. So what I help people do is perfectionism again, and how that shows up in life. It's just parts. It's just a part. So perfection to me is not the problem. I know that somebody is a perfectionist because of the core wound of shame and these other core wounds that I'm going to go over. They don't know that. The hard part about my job is getting somebody from being like, I have no idea what you're talking about, to being like, I'm a little open-minded to it now, to being like, okay, it's starting to make sense, to being like, wow, all right, how do we keep going with this? Now, for some people, that could take 3 months. For some, that could take 3 years. It all depends on how much trauma we hold. It depends on how deep these wounds are, how many of protective parts we have, our survival patterns. So, that's, I look at behaviors as ways that we try to protect ourselves from feeling shame. We don't want to feel shame. It's a bad feeling. It kicks up a lot. And so like with all the other core wounds, we don't want to feel these. The issue is that as the years go on in life, they never disappear. They live inside of us. And they come out in various different ways. And what my job is to help somebody get aware enough and get there to where they're saying, okay, let's heal this shame. And then we have to heal the shame, right? We go back into maybe where it originated. All right, maybe back into that childhood home, the home environment, right? The relationships that were going on in the family that left shame. And we have to go back and give you the space. We call it reparenting. And so you get to reparent yourself now as an adult and meet the needs that you didn't get met back then. So if you were somebody that was highly criticized growing up and you became a perfectionist, we are trying to teach your system that you're okay. That it's all right to make a mistake, right? It's not tied into your worth. But again, I'm working with beliefs and thoughts and feelings. All right, so, the question is always like, well, how do I heal shame? Basically, money. Money heals. I'm just playing around. How great of an answer, though, right? Just make more money. That's going to heal. So, no, that's not the case. And here's the other thing, too, when we're doing this work. Like, people don't want to believe me for whatever reason. And it's like, if I told people that if they started doing this work, 3 months, 3 years, whatever, that at the end of it, they would make a couple of $1,000,000, there'd be a lot more people calling me, right? They'd be like, yeah, I'm with it. Man, oh man, like I have no idea what this guy's talking about. I have no idea what's going on. I don't even believe half this stuff, but shoot, if I could make a couple of $1,000,000 at the end of this, I'm with it. So I view that the same way, but in terms of like financial wealth, I view it as spiritual wealth. So, I want people to have that same mentality of saying, hey, I'm with doing this work. Now, I'm not going to get the financial $1,000,000, but spiritually, man, am I going to change. It's going to change my whole life. Now, I don't speak from, like, I'm not guessing here. Like, this is, I've lived this experience where I've changed so much over the years where I know it's possible. And I've helped people. I've talked with people. I work with people in doing this type of work. You could change so much through healing. So a lot of times I say healing starts by just becoming aware. Just starting to become aware of like, man, I'm putting a lot of pressure on this email right now, right? Perfectionism. Man, oh man, like I can't send this text message. Like what's holding me back? Just even becoming aware of that just for the beginning is pretty good. So, quick self-reflection before I move on. When was the last time that you felt like you had to prove your worth? Instead of just believing that you already have it. All right, wound number 2, rejection. So, rejection looks like feeling invisible, feeling misunderstood, feeling like you had to become someone different to be accepted. And maybe a belief that's tied into that is, I don't belong, or I'm unlovable, or people won't choose me. Or, just being me, that's not enough. So if this wound is still shaping your life today, let's take a look. You may find yourself people pleasing. So again, when people come across me and they're people pleasing, I think core wound of rejection. You spend so much energy making sure that everybody else is okay. So when I hear clients of mine telling me about this in their in their sessions, I know that they're hiding their rejection wound. So sometimes I'll even just jump right in and say, what do you need? Right, to my client. Kind of just stop them from going into the whole story. And they honestly don't know. Which, if we're healthy, we want to know our needs. We want to know how to meet them. Or how to be comfortable enough to voice them to others. To have them meet some of our needs. But when you have a core wound of rejection, you spend a lot of time focusing on somebody else. Like maybe saying no feels incredibly difficult for somebody with a core wound of rejection. right? Disappointing someone feels terrifying, right? You'd rather just disappoint yourself over and over and over again than risk someone being upset with you. Or maybe conflict to you feels very dangerous. Again, conflict became connected to losing love. So if you had conflict in the past and then you felt like the person didn't talk to you, maybe you felt that they pulled the love away, you're not going to want to have that again happen. So you do not want to lose connection with your loved ones when you have a core wound of rejection. So you could be somebody like at work, you're one person, but then when you're with your friends, you're another person. When you're with your family, you're another person. Because your nervous system learned that you need to adapt in order to belong. And I get it. There is some form of fitting in. But to what degree? For the most part, I am me at work, with my friends, and with my family. So if acceptance felt conditional growing up, it makes a ton of sense that you work incredibly hard to keep everyone happy. People pleasing is prevalent. I really can identify with people pleasing. And I know what it is now. It's a survival pattern, a way of living that people have. If I have a core wound of rejection, and if people aren't happy with me, then my system does not feel safe, right? That belief is there. So how healing begins. Rejection begins healing when we stop rejecting ourselves. So we're going to start looking within, right? And stop looking without. And healing often looks surprisingly simple, actually, when we start breaking this down. And what I help people do is we practice in the office or on Zoom, whatever it is, learning to say no, right? For some people, I'm telling you, we can't, our system won't allow it. It brings up too much. There's so much fear there. We're worried. And so we practice something small. Speaking honestly, another thing, right? What happens if I speak honestly about this topic? If I have a core wound of rejection, I'm going to really worry about speaking up about a topic that maybe is very important to me, that I care about. So working with me, we speak honestly, right? And we start, right? I'm giving you that space to feel safe, non-judged. We also learn about what you need and how to express those needs. Now, believe it or not, this stuff needs to be practiced. One of the greatest gifts that you can give yourself is allowing yourself to be fully yourself. So reflection, how much of your life is spent trying to earn acceptance instead of believing you're already worthy of it? All right, I am going to move on to the next three: fear, abandonment, and confusion. So fear, another core wound. So when I say fear, I'm not talking about fear of heights or, being afraid of spiders or snakes. I'm talking about growing up in an environment where your nervous system learned that the world is not predictable, that something bad could happen at any moment. But how does a child get there with that? Is maybe there was a lot of alcohol abuse in the house. Now, once I find out that somebody grew up with a lot of alcohol abuse at home, I already know that they have a lot of wounds. And I'm going to come across a lot of their protector parts. There is no doubt in my mind. In fact, many of the research and the people that I learned from, actually at the top of the list is alcohol abuse in the home. So, which is shocking, right? Because so many people I know, it's so normal, right? We've normalized that to the point where we're like, nah, get out of here. That's not that much of a problem. Like, that didn't impact me that much. And until you sit down with somebody who's very familiar with this and can guide you through, you'll never even come close to understanding how much a person and a family that abuses alcohol, how much impact they have on everybody, let alone children. So, another thing is emotional unpredictability, right? You never know what kind of mood your parent's going to be in, right? So you walk on eggshells because you never just know what version of mom or dad you're going to get. And again, I'm speaking, there's no physical danger going on, right? No physical abuse. All of this stuff I'm talking about can be traumatic, right? Emotional danger. So when you have that fear in you as a child, your body learns, stay ready, be prepared. You know, the belief, the world is not safe. When people have a core wound of fear, they can't trust people. Now, I get it. I'm not saying walk around randomly and trust everybody. But again, a lot of my work is marriage and parenting. And believe it or not, there are plenty of spouses in a marriage that do not trust their spouse. They don't. Now, they think it's because of the spouse, right? They think it's because of the spouse's behavior. And part of that is true. But I'm also pretty certain that they already had a core wound of fear way before the husband or wife came into the picture. And that's another area that a person has to, get guided into. Because when we have fear and don't trust in our marriage, we naturally assume and blame the spouse. And because, if you spent a lot of time together, then spouses hurt each other. So you're honing in on the spouse's behavior, which keeps you away from looking deeper within you, which is exactly what your core wound wants, right? Doesn't want to look at that core wound of fear and where it came from, where it developed. So another belief is I always have to be prepared. Something bad is going to happen. I can't relax. I have to stay on guard. Right? If I let my guard down, I'm going to get hurt. So that's the core wound of fear. And how does this show up in your life today? You may notice yourself overthinking everything. You're constantly anxious. You replay conversations over in your head, right? You ruminate on these conversations. You're somebody that thinks through every possible outcome. Because your brain believes that if it can predict every possibility, you're going to be safe. Again, that core wound of fear is not going to get touched or brought up to the surface. So many times right? I work with people with anxiety. And, they tie their anxiety into what's happening today. So, one helpful technique is checking to see where this anxiety is held in our body. Are our shoulders tight? Is our jaw clenched? Is our body tense? You have difficulty relaxing. Even when nothing is wrong, your body is tensed up. You're not in danger. The threat is gone. But your nervous system doesn't know the difference between a real threat and something that's old that's still living in your system. So, and I mean, this is like, I always tell clients this, but it's like bacon and eggs, right? It's like a coffee and a cigarette. They go together so perfectly. Anxiety and control. Once somebody tells me they have anxiety, I know they have control. I know they have a control issue. That's that because it goes together so perfectly. Right? Once you have that fear of outcomes, fear of something bad happening, your system's like, we're going to control. We're going to control everything as best we can. We're going to make sure nothing bad happens, right? So you control plans. Like, seriously, control plans. You control schedules. You have to know what's coming next. You do not handle a schedule change or something coming out of the blue. You do not handle that in stride. That really rocks the nervous system. Again, right? You might want to blame the circumstances outside of you. Well, yeah, I'm mad because this happened and I didn't have it planned. It's not that. It's that whatever happened, the schedule change is touching on your core wound of fear. And again, we don't want that. Our system developed these patterns and these survival parts not to have that come out. When plans suddenly change, your anxiety rises. Because again, for your system, there's danger there. Maybe you're somebody that stays busy all the time. Now, I know staying busy is just trying to stay ahead of their pain. I'm just going to stay busy, right? It's like running running on a treadmill. It's like they're trying to run as fast as they can, but they can't outrun a core wound. It's in them. But they don't know that, so they're busy. I'm busy over here. I'm busy here. I'm busy with the spouse. We got family plans. Our kids are constantly busy, so that means I'm busy. I'm busy at work. Busy, busy, busy. All that tells me is you have a core wound of fear that is unhealed, that you're probably not even aware of. You think you're busy because you're like, everything falls on me and I have to get this stuff done. And, this is what you see. You don't realize that it's just something much deeper going on. So what happens is when you're not busy and life slows down and gets a little quiet, right? You would think, hey, I'm going to feel good. No, Now when you have a core wound of fear, when life gets quiet, the emotions that you've been avoiding for years and decades, right, start to surface. So what happens when this core wound of fear or another core wound starts to surface, right, bubble up to the top? We go back to busy, right? That's our survival pattern. Maybe you're somebody that expects the worst. someone doesn't answer your phone call, and instead of just being like, they told me that they're busy, you expect the worst. Something terrible happened. Your child is late coming home. Your mind immediately imagines disaster. Again, your nervous system is preparing you. It's almost like you're putting it out there in the universe. People with anxiety do this. Right? Even putting that negative energy out there in the universe, it's their way of controlling. Right? This party is going to be terrible. I'm telling you, I'm going to run into people I don't know, I don't like. Oh, this is not going to be good. This is not going to be good. And then the moment something happens in the party, it's like, I knew it. I knew. That's why you always prepare. That's why you think ahead. I'm not crazy. You're not realizing that a healthy person would be excited to go to a party. They look forward to going to a party. Maybe bringing some fun along to the party with them. And if something did happen, they trust their system enough to know that they can handle it. So how does healing begin with anxiety? How do we heal fear? Not by pretending life is perfectly safe. There's no way life is not perfectly safe. That's just not reality. Healing begins by teaching our nervous system that this moment is different from the past. So learning to pause before reacting, learning to notice when you become activated instead of just acting out on it. Building healthy relationships where consistency, just showing up consistently as you can, replaces chaos. So your nervous system, when you start showing up like this day in and day out, your nervous system starts collecting new evidence, right? This is called rewiring. It's like, wow, I survived that conversation. Or I handled that disagreement. I don't have to prepare for disaster every minute of the day. And that's the other thing. We are never trying to get rid of fear. Fear can be healthy. It can help our system out. It just means that fear is not dictating how we show up in life anymore. It doesn't run our life. Reflection. When life finally becomes peaceful, what happens inside of you? Can you actually enjoy the peace? Wound number 4, abandonment. So this wound is much more than someone just, abandoning you physically. A parent can be in the same house with you every single day and still be emotionally unavailable. You can feel abandoned even when someone is physically present. And so what you pick up in terms of a belief with the abandonment wound is everyone leaves, or love never lasts, or I'll end up alone. I can't depend on people. If I get too close, I'll get hurt. And how do you know you have this wound? You may constantly need reassurance in your life today, in your adult life, maybe in your marriage. Right? You're constantly wondering, are we okay? Everything okay? Are we okay? Are we good? Are you upset with me? And it's not because you're being very needy. It's because uncertainty to your system feels painful. So when you have the core wound of abandonment, you read into everything deeply. A delayed text message, a different tone of voice, someone cancels plans on you, So a person with this core wound of man thinks people are pulling away from me. They're going to leave me. What did I do wrong? Oh, I guess they don't want me around anymore. So if people repeatedly disappeared, emotionally or physically, why wouldn't your nervous system become sensitive to distance? Right? This is not irrational. This is called protection. Your nervous system is trying to prevent you from experiencing that pain again. So how do you heal the core wound of abandonment? Consistency. Developing healthy, trusting relationships. They go a long way. People whose words in your life match their actions. People who show up in your life physically and emotionally. But again, one big one here is not to abandon ourselves. Right? That means keeping promises to yourself. Comforting yourself when you're hurting. Speaking kindly to yourself, because many of us struggle with that inner critic. Healing is about becoming someone where you won't leave yourself, and you'll be able to have people around your life that will show that back to you. Reflection. When someone creates a little distance, what story does your mind immediately tell you? Wound number 5, confusion. Imagine growing up hearing, you're too sensitive, or that never happened, or you're remembering it all wrong. Or maybe you heard, oh, come on, stop crying. Oh, you're overreacting. Those are subtle messages to a child, right? They stop trusting themselves. Right? Maybe my feelings are wrong, right? I trust this adult so much in my life. Maybe other people know me better than I know myself. So the belief that's tied to that core wound is I can't trust myself. My feelings are wrong. Other people know better than I do. And at the end of the day, I really don't know who I am. And if this wound is still showing up in your life today, let's say someone asks, how are you feeling? Your honest answer is, I don't know. Because you've become disconnected from your feelings. You second guess almost every decision. Even small choices become like exhausting to you. I don't know, what should I do? I don't know, what would you do? Why don't you tell me what would you do if you were in my position? What do you think I should do? Constantly looking outside yourself for answers. You're ignoring your own intuition. Something feels off, but you talk yourself out of it. You've learned to trust everybody else's opinions and not your own. Maybe you've become incredibly good at understanding everyone else's emotions while having almost no idea what's happening inside of you. You know what everybody else needs except for you. So how do you heal this core wound? Start learning to ask, what am I feeling? And I use the feelings wheel for people with this core wound of confusion. What do I need? I also have a list of needs that we all have. My clients get them. What part of me is showing up right now? So instead of going right into like, what does everyone else think? We go into like, what do I honestly think? And we learn to be okay with it. What do I feel? Again, we use the feelings wheel to help us out if we need it. What do I need? Now, for some people, it's like, that sounds very simple. But for someone carrying this wound, this stuff is not simple. In fact, when they start healing it, it's life-changing. Reflection. Do you trust your own inner voice? All right. Rounding out the 7 core wounds, we have number 6, hopelessness. Right? People might look at someone who lacks motivation and think, oh, they're being lazy. Or, these people, they just need to try harder. But hopelessness is about disappointment and repeated disappointment over and over again throughout the childhood. Imagine being a child who keeps hoping things will be different. Maybe you're hoping your parents stop fighting, stop drinking. Maybe you hope dad would cut back, right, on the alcohol. Or mom, whatever. Maybe you hope mom would finally notice you. Maybe you kept believing, next time's going to be different. But next time is not different. Eventually, your brain protects you by saying, don't expect anything more from these people. Because if you stop hoping, that's a great way to not get disappointed again, which is very painful. So a child begins, nothing ever changes. Why even try? This is just how life is. I mean, there's no point. And if this wound is still showing up in your life today, you may struggle getting started with something. Because part of you already expects failure. So maybe you procrastinate. Maybe you've settled. Because you stopped believing that anything better is possible. That's a core wound of hopelessness. So how do you heal? Again, small moments. One healthy decision, right? Setting one healthy boundary at a time. Having one honest conversation at a time. And we practice this stuff in the office before you go out. Finding that one safe relationship that you know that you can go to. Right? Eventually, with these little changes, your brain starts to say, hey, you know what? Maybe change is actually possible. Because hope grows through experience, right? We have to take action on it. It's not just wishful thinking. Reflection. What dream have you quietly stopped believing is possible? Last one. Wound number 7, powerlessness. Nothing I do matters. No one listens. No one protects me. My voice changes nothing. When you're a child, you often truly are powerless. You depend 100% on adults. You can't leave. You can't create healthy boundaries. You can't choose another family. That powerlessness makes sense. The challenge is when we carry that same belief into adulthood. So a child begins believing, I have no control. My voice doesn't matter. No one listens to me. Other people, they have all the power. And if this wound is still showing up in your life today, you may struggle setting boundaries. You know that something is not okay, but saying something just feels impossible. So maybe you avoid difficult conversations and you're just thinking, what's the point? They're not going to understand me anyway. But maybe resentment builds because you spent years saying yes when your heart wants to say no. Maybe you're always waiting. You're waiting for your spouse to change or waiting for your boss to change, waiting for life to finally get easier. Meanwhile, your own inner voice Stay silent. Powerlessness. You know what? See, if your voice wasn't welcomed as a child, your nervous system believes speaking up, it's not going to get you anywhere. Powerlessness, you know, it's just, it won't matter. Right? Don't bother. So how do you heal this core wound of powerlessness? Power returns by making one small choice at a time. Again, it's that one boundary at a time. Honest conversation. One request, one decision at a time. And we start small. Every time you use your voice, your nervous system begins learning something new, right? Like, hey, wait, I have a little influence here. A little more than I thought. I matter. I can protect myself. Now, healing doesn't mean controlling everyone else. Healing just means that we are taking responsibility for the part of our lives that actually belongs to us. Reflection. Where have you stopped using your voice because you've convinced yourself that it's not going to make a difference? All right, guys, that's a little over an hour. I'm going to finish up